Welcome to Legacy Blueprint, Planet Forward, the podcast where top thought leaders in law, finance, and wealth planning come together to guide your future. Hosted by distinguished estate planning attorney Mike Bascom, each episode highlights industry experts who bring clarity, innovation, and proven strategies to the table. Because building a legacy isn't a solo act, it's the result of a team of professionals working in harmony. Join us weekly as we showcase the leaders shaping tomorrow and give you the tools to plan with confidence today.
Welcome to Legacy Blueprint, Planet Forward. I'm your host, Mike Bascom, and it's my great pleasure today to welcome Amy Adams. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you very much for having me.
I'm going to read your bio here just so everyone knows who you are, okay? So
Mhm.
you're a licensed broker with over 17 years of experience in real estate, certified as both a gold standard instructor, GSI, and a certified distance education instructor, CDEI. Since
Yes.
2007, she has combined her deep industry knowledge with a passion for teaching, preparing aspiring agents through practical, real-world instruction. As an active broker, Amy stays on top of market trends, ensuring her students receive up-to-date, relevant education. Known for her supportive and approachable style, she's a trusted mentor and respected leader in real estate education. Thanks for joining us, Amy.
I'm glad to be here.
So you've been a licensed broker since 2007. What drew you to real estate, and how's your perspective evolved over the last few years?
Well, I have been licensed since 2007, but I had an entry-level license in 2007, and I didn't upgrade my license until 2022. I got my broker level license. I still practice as an associate broker, which means I work up underneath a broker still because I don't run my own firm. I work full-time here at the CE shop, and it's very demanding because I'm licensed in multiple states, and I couldn't give the supervision for my licensees that I would need to if I ran my own firm. But I have evolved in a lot of ways. When I first got my license, I did not want to do it. I was a hairdresser and I had just had a brand new baby. My husband at the time came home and said, "You're going to real estate school." I was like, "Who are you talking to?" And he's like, "You." And because he, like many people, got into house flipping and he was already in construction, and I got my license for that purpose to help him research what properties to buy. Most of my practice was foreclosures and title work, which is a not always fun part of the business. But over the 17 years, I've evolved into having a lot more respect. I didn't really understand the business at all. I didn't own a home before. I married someone who owned a home. I was a hairdresser and I was self-employed. I thought it was unreachable. And my perspective has evolved so much in 17 years. And being a real estate licensee, this is a service that we offer to help consumers. They're not required, you don't need me or anybody else to buy a home or sell a home. It's a service that we provide. And I just have a lot more respect for the entire business and home ownership. I see now how important it is.
Well, the industry's evolved a lot in the last 17 years. What are the biggest things that you've seen that have evolved?
I don't know. I mean, this is the United States. People live in houses. They don't live in, someone owns them, even if you don't.
Mhm.
And you've seen over the last 17 years, including the crash, people were like, oh, well, so many houses foreclosed and things like that. But that opened a door, I believe, to these large corporate owners, especially here in Atlanta. I Googled you, I know where you live. We're in the same city. But here in Atlanta, a huge amount of homes, entry-level homes,
Mhm.
are owned by corporations. And that has been a big change, which has changed the industry as far as licensees, because now property management is a huge chunk of our industry as a licensee. You can go into just that niche, just into property management, which has its own red wagon to pull. It's a lot. It's a lot. There's still, of course, licensees all through the state, helping people buy and sell, but there's also people helping manage, talking HOA management, property management, basically governing an entire fleet of homes that a corporation might own.
Now, you do something that's a little bit unusual, at least as far as what I typically see with agents. you have some certifications, the CDEI and the GSI certifications.
Those are mostly for instructors. Most of what I do every day of my life is real estate education. Of course, I still practice, and because I'm an instructor of record for multiple different states, I have to maintain an active license. But a gold standard instructor is something given out by the Real Estate Education Association, and it's just about learning how to adapt your teaching styles to reach more kind of learners. More learners, like some people are audio, some people are visual, some people are kinetic, they have to do it. It's about that and learning different. And then also after COVID,
Mhm.
so much came to live online, which is via Zoom, and how to connect with students. That's what the CDEI is, the Certified Distance Education Instructor. And that is given out by ARELO, which is the Association of Real Estate License Law Officials.
Okay.
And it's for certified distance education. You have to have that to be an instructor of record for asynchronous courses that are approved by the different state real estate commissions. And it just gives you a little bit of an edge on knowing how to connect with learners this way. And more importantly, my passion, which is how I went to real estate school, it was online, but it's the written word, making sure that our written word is correct and easy to understand, that it's accurate for the license law in your state, and it's easy to understand so that you'll be able to take that knowledge and apply it. Now, for a lot of learners, it's really intuitive, it's easy to understand, but some people struggle to learn legally kind of stuff. Does that make sense? I don't
Mhm.
want to be condescending. And so those people just need a little bit extra. I want to make sure that they can understand it too, because a lot of the students in real estate school who struggle with the written word and that kind of content are great at this job. This is the people business.
I love
And I
that.
want to be able to get them the knowledge they need to pass the licensing exam because they're going to go on to make people great homeowners.
I love that. I understand that your teaching focuses on real world application. So maybe if you could share with us, what are a few of the practical principles that new agents often overlook that can make a huge difference in their early success, especially?
Well, I could talk for hours on this, but a few practical principles is that people do not need you. This is a service that we offer, and we're representing people and their interests, and that carries a heavy weight. It carries a heavy weight that you're helping people buy the most expensive thing that they've ever owned.
Mhm.
And it's a scary process. And then also, in order to make that license law make sense, here comes the real world applications. Like, here's a story that happened to me. Don't be me. Don't say
Mhm.
this. Don't, and to bring it to life, because on paper it can seem a little bit dry. And when I explain to students that they need to look at this license law through the lens of consumer protections, that these are not people who have been through this before necessarily. I mean, some people have bought multiple homes. If you're damaged financially, that can follow you for years, and this carries a heavy weight. And so, those real world applications that I try to make sure are correct when I'm explaining things, because this is all written or video or activity content at the CE shop. We do have some states that require live online, but Georgia's not one of them. But to have these real life applications correct and accurate so that they make sense and do the real job, which is making sure these students look at it through the lens of consumer protections. If you realize that all of this junk that you're learning is to make sure that consumers don't get hurt, it all kind of makes sense. This is to protect you, the licensee. You're a
Mhm.
professional. You know what you're doing or you're supposed to. And that this is to make sure that consumers aren't harmed.
Love it. So you're not only an educator, but you're also an active broker, as I understand it. So how
So
has staying engaged in the market help you better equip your students for today's real estate challenges?
it helps you develop bring in real life situations into the curriculum that help illustrate what's going on now and how this license law applies to it. Helps them remember for the licensing exam. Now, the licensing exams in each state and in Georgia here particularly, this gives you a real estate license. It gives you the ability to accept compensation for helping people buy, sell, rent, or lease real property. But there's so many niches that you can go into. This is the foundation Not everybody's going to go into residential real estate, but it helps me be aware of what's happening on the streets. And, deed fraud is a big deal here in Georgia right now. It
Mhm.
helps me develop curriculum, help the curriculum developers develop curriculum that will be continuing education that they would need. Not so much, all of our curriculum is for the most part, we do have Realtor classes, NAR stuff, but it mostly is for gaining and maintaining licensure, which includes legal updates, like if a law has changed,
Yeah.
or there's something new on the streets, like I said, deed fraud. That's my big passion right now, and getting a course developed here at the CE shop to cover that. And different things that in different states licensees can be aware of to help them protect their clients, that they are aware that they can, get title alerts and things like that.
Oh, interesting. I know a lot of the listeners on this show, they have real estate, or as they plan for their family's future, they're going to be adding real estate. What role do you see real estate playing in building long-term wealth, or what have you seen so far?
Huge role. I mean, and this goes back generationally. Generational wealth is built by real estate. And one of the illustrations that I give is you see the role of African Americans in World War II coming home with the GI Bill, and they had the ability to buy a house, but they were redlined, they couldn't get a loan where they lived,
Hmm.
but then had private deed restrictions that prevented them from purchasing in areas that were lendable, and so it cut an entire generation of Americans out of home ownership. And for an example, I bought my house here in North Forsyth County in 2016 for $115,000. I only buy stuff that's on sale, so it was worth about $175,000 at the time.
Hmm.
And now it's worth over 400. That is generational life-changing wealth. I mean, to some people, $300,000 is not a huge amount of money, right? To me, it is. And coming from my mother was the first of her family to own real estate. And to have that, to inherit a house and be able to borrow against it, like my husband did, and start a business or things of that, to have an asset that you can collateralize, if that makes sense. It is life-changing for families to own a home because you're going to pay in the United States to lay your head down. It's a fact. And if you're going to pay for it, you might as well own it because there are some reasons where renting is the smarter choice, right? I'm not discounting renting at all. But if you want to build wealth and you're going to live in your home for any amount of time, you're paying a mortgage. It just might not be yours.
Yeah. Yeah. Essentially, every client who has wealth has real estate someplace in their portfolio, oftentimes many pieces. So that's what we tend to
And
see.
that is above even my scale as a homeowner. But it is absolutely true. You can really build wealth exponentially, but even just a family paying to live and go to work and raise their children, it's like a savings account that you sleep in.
Love it. Georgia's real estate market, we've seen some dramatic shifts, particularly in recent years. What are some of the trends that you're currently tracking, and what do you expect will happen with them, both from a teaching side as well as, personal production side?
Deed fraud in Georgia is a big deal. The market is evening out. We were seller heavy. Seller could name their price for a long time, years as long as I can't remember even when it started. I think when I first got my license, it was pretty well even. But now then it was seller heavy, and now it's shifting, and a lot of it's a complicated answer, and I'm not a financial analyst, but I know what I think but it's evened out where buyers have bargaining power, where there were, a year and a half ago when buyers were removing contingencies out of their contracts just to even have a chance to get a home. That
Mhm.
is not buyer friendly. And some potential clients, I said, listen, if you can't afford to lose your earnest money, you need to sit this out and let this calm down. This is not the time for you. And that's my recommendation as your real estate professional, because it was a dangerous game. But now it's even. Buyers can ask for things and get them. And the seller's not just automatic. Well, a lot of sellers haven't really had their finger on the pulse and don't know that the tide has turned a little bit. They still want to be able to name their price and get all their terms and conditions and things like that. And, they're having to say yes. And so it's a little it's evened out. It's actually kind of nice, especially if you work with buyers. I mostly worked with sellers, but is important to always see through the lens of a buyer's eyes.
So recently, it looks like, from my perspective, that the private equity money, the Wall Street money is slowing down as far as coming in and buying. They used to come in and buy homes all cash, no inspection, as you're talking about. And it seems to me that that trend is slowing down. Are you noticing anything about
No, they still are buying. They just there's nothing left.
that?
They bought the entry level homes mostly, and I've heard another broker in Georgia talk about how they believe that some of those entry level homes, the more affordable housing, will never hit the streets again for purchase from an owner occupant. Those guys are always buying, but they can't, there's just not as much available because they only go up to a certain level because they use that internal rate of return to gauge how long they want to hold it. I
Okay.
always worry about when they want to dump it, but I believe they'll dump whole portfolios. But I don't have a crystal ball either. The private equity is problematic, but this is the United States. You can't tell anyone they can't buy something. That's just not an option either.
Mhm.
But I'm hopeful that remote work, including myself, I live here in North Forsyth County. My son goes to North Forsyth High School. I have one child left in school, and then I'm taking my equity and bouncing
Mhm.
because I can live someplace as long as there's internet, reliable internet, I can live anywhere, and I have to be near an airport for some of my stuff that I have to do for the CE shop. I would love to live in a small town. So I'm hoping that remote work will help distribute some of these people into more affordable areas where they don't have to live in Gwinnett County. I mean, Kentucky, Indiana, parts of Michigan will pay you to move there as a remote worker.
That is interesting as well. I suspect some of those rural areas, though, are not real pleased to have outsiders come in because it tends to drive up their prices as well. Maybe if they're a seller, they are, but if they're trying to compete against a new buyer moving in from a metro area, they're probably not terribly excited
Well,
about
but I think what it is they don't have anybody buying.
it. Mm.
They have, ghost towns in it's Eastern Kentucky that I saw that ad for. But Eastern Kentucky's lovely. I'd love to live there. And I've loved my time in Forsyth County, but I also grew up in Alpharetta, which if you're from here,
Well, that's not changed at
you
all in the last 15 years.
I graduated from high school in 1990. My mom
Okay.
graduated from Milton High School in 1967.
Oh boy.
Norfolk Hospital wasn't there when I was a child. I mean, it's expensive, and the schools here in North Forsyth County are great. But once I don't have a child there anymore, I don't know if I'll stay or not.
Well, that bodes well for someone who's trying to sell because the demand is so high, the schools are so strong. It's kind of a natural draw for buyers. So this is kind of
It
a
is.
protected bubble here across the northern part of
It
metro
is a
area.
protected bubble, and I worry about some of the farmland. Some states are passing legislation where foreign entities cannot buy
Mhm.
large amounts of land in their states. I don't know if Georgia will do that because, we do have all these factories here and things like that. But Utah and Montana have passed legislation about stuff like that. I would like to see some of our farming protected. But, I also strongly believe that this is the United States. If you own it, you should be able to sell it and buy it.
All right, I gotta switch gears on you just a little bit. Let's talk a little bit more about someone who maybe is just coming into real estate as a career. What are some of the common misconceptions that you see that you have to kind of correct when someone's coming in as a new potential agent?
But this is a business, it's not a job. Just with any business, say if you have a bakery,
Hmm.
you can make the best cakes in the world and best cupcakes and everybody, and your friends and family love them, but your friends and family are only going to buy so many cupcakes, right? You've got to market yourself. And that part is difficult for some people.
Hmm.
There's the job that you do, which is showing homes, helping people make offers and work through contracts and things like that, but then you have to find the people to work with. And that is not a comfortable situation. You have to be a business person and be able to be comfortable asking for business and be comfortable with somebody telling you no, thanks. That is difficult.
Yeah, and I think that applies for lots of businesses. Once you burn through your warm market, now is this sustainable or is this just a little fancy hobby that you had on the side?
Right. I mean, I think it is sustainable. I mean, I know people who've been in real estate for 50 years. It is
Hmm.
sustainable, but I do see shifts in the market. It's funny because I always say that when you see Judy and 65 years old in North Alabama making TikTok videos, she's slow. But that's one of the other things that I always, because our content is online, but I'm student facing. So when students have questions, I call them or email them and talk them through it. I get them alone. I'm like, this is part of the business, is getting business. And when I was practicing real estate full time, I saved half of every commission I made and pretended I didn't even have it
Mhm.
because it's cyclical, right?
Mhm.
And it's cyclical, just not just in terms of times of year, spring is gangbusters, Christmas maybe not so much. It's cyclical in that way, but it's also year to year it might change. You always want to be smart with your money. I'm not saying don't go buy a new purse. I'm just saying, you have to be smart with your money. And that's what ends careers, is people living high on the hog when the getting's good. There are times in real estate where there is money to be made, but there's times when it's slow and you need to be smart. And like I said, was mostly foreclosures and title work. And during the pandemic,
Mhm.
what? There weren't any.
Yeah.
And I went for about 18 months without having to go get another job, and that's why I work here. And then, I still do practice.
Well, a couple years ago, there was a boom time, though. It seemed like you couldn't miss, if you were in the real estate
It is,
industry.
and I call that, there's a time when I call it, you're an order taker,
Mhm.
but you're also helping people. Real estate is the same thing. Marketing the property to buyers and buyers agents, right? And then you get somebody on the hook, but then that's contract to close and overcoming the hurdles of financing or appraisals or different things that happen. There's two parts to every transaction, and
Right.
you've got to be good at that. And the order takers struggle with the second part. It's easy to get a buyer on the hook when the getting's good, but jumping through the mess and being able to analyze the different contracts or offers that come in on a property and explain them to your seller, and help them make an educated decision on which offer to accept and work with,
Mhm.
and when to cut and run and say, hey, we're moving out of this one and moving to the next one. That's where the expertise comes in. But I think people see things on television and they're like, I just get dressed up, put some lipstick on, and go open some doors. And it's much more complicated. And there are legal boundaries to
Mhm.
what you can do. And that's what licensure is about. And that's, where our focus is here at the CE shop, is gaining and maintaining licensure.
Interesting. You mentioned example of someone who's an experienced person who maybe is jumping on TikTok now in order to cast ads out there. How do you stay current and keep your curriculum fresh and engaging? Because there's new learning
Well,
styles with new people coming in into the market.
Well, there are boundaries to that too. And I kind of draw a little bit of a hard line where they're like, I didn't know I was going to have to read this much. And I'm like, you
Mhm.
want to sell Americans' most expensive asset without reading anything? You want it all spoon fed to you? You're going to have to use your critical thinking skills, and you're going to have to put some effort into this, or you're going to fail in business anyways, if you don't have the ability to read words and comprehend what they say. But I was talking about for my real estate practice. If you see who's been a successful listing agent in North Alabama, and she's in her 60s, and she's out there jumping around making TikTok videos to get business as a real estate licensee, not as an educator. That is indicative of the market. There were 117,000 licensees in the state of Georgia, 42,000 closings last year. It's
Wow.
slow.
Wow. Yeah. Interesting numbers. Thanks for sharing those. So, part of your job is to help students get licensed, which includes passing exams. But as you mentioned, this is a very competitive industry. So, what do you do to help them build confidence that they can actually make it?
Well, I'll tell you what I really say, which is I tell them when a student maybe fails a final exam or a licensing exam, and they think, I'm just not smart enough, I'm not this, I'm not that. I'm like, I want you to think about all the real estate agents that you know. Then I wait and I let them digest that and think about all the real estate. I said, are these people rocket surgeons?
Mhm.
No, this is the people business. I was a cocktail waitress, a bartender, and a hairdresser
Mhm.
before I got my real estate license in 2007. And it is the people business. And a lot of students who struggle with the content are great at the people business. They're great at intuitively knowing what Mike Bascom needs,
Mhm.
and that because a lot of times you're talking people off the ledge, because they're wondering if their offer is going to be accepted or if they're going to get what they want for their house and things of that nature. It is just being able to read people. And I did something very specific in real estate. My cousin mostly works with buyers, and she's great at the Southern lifestyle. We both grew up in Alpharetta, and she's like, look at this shiny black Doa. Isn't this gorgeous? And she intuitively knows when a buyer's going to love a home, and she
Mhm.
sees through the eyes of a buyer. And then and I talk fast and I move fast and I do things like that. But then there's a guy at my office and he is a retiree from a first career. A lot of real estate agents are second careers.
Mhm.
And he moves a little slower. His clientele appreciates that he's not trying to cram 10 showings into an afternoon on a Saturday because he's got to get to the next person. You, just like as a hairdresser, you will attract a clientele that appreciates what you bring to the table. If you do your best, if you work hard, if you care, you will develop a clientele that likes what you have to offer. If you're a numbers guy, if you're into the finances and the investment side of it, you bring that. That's the clientele that you're going to attract. So I calm them down and I let them know that, listen, we're not getting a doctorate in forensic, accounting here. This is, I need you to know the parameters of license law so that you don't break the law, but you can do this. And a lot of people who don't do well, who struggle in the course, are great at the job.
There's a lot of families right now who have their own home for real estate, but they're also looking at real estate as an investment opportunity, either for themselves or potentially as a career for their kids. Do you think are some of the key factors they should be thinking about if they're, looking at it as an opportunity?
Well, real estate as an investment is always a good idea. It's make an educated investment. Don't take the seller's word for it that this is a great deal. Do your own research or find someone who you trust to give you the research on a real estate investment. Luckily, here in Georgia, and I don't know where your listeners are from, but luckily here in Georgia, prices aren't really going down.
Hmm.
And you can have a downward trending market, but prices don't necessarily go down. But investment is it's going to pay back, but when? And that's the investment part of it. And what are you going to use it for? So choose if you're going to invest in real estate as an investment, not just as a place to lay your head, do your research and know who you want guiding you as your real estate professional. And then as a career path for your children, it is great, but it is a business, not a job with a paycheck. Because I have a friend who has a real estate school in South Carolina. She's had it's an in-person school. She's had moms come bring their child, their adult child, an 18-year-old, 19-year-old kid with his lunch basket and basically shove him out of the car. And if you're having to force somebody into it, this is a business that you're going to have to nurture for it to grow. It's not, getting somebody a job at Best Buy, where they get a paycheck and all they have to do is show up for work and breathe in and out. Not that Best Buy is not, a job where you have to think, but I'm just saying it's not just a job, it's a business.
For sure.
So,
I like that.
and it requires self-discipline.
I see that for sure. All right. So you've been working as a broker, a mentor, a leader in real estate education. What kind of a legacy do you hope that you're leaving through your work?
I hope that, and I know that all the people that have bought investment properties from me are making money. And I practice as an associate broker, so I don't mentor licensees underneath me. But I want to see my students succeed in their careers in whatever niche areas they end up with. And I have gotten to see that, and it's amazing. It's amazing. It is. They send me an email when they pass their licensing exam, or, I had a student who really struggled. She was English as a second language. I was like, you don't understand. You're going to kill it
Mhm.
because you can make an entire other group of people comfortable with what you're telling them because you can say it to them in words that they understand well. And she is killing it. And I had her come in to speak at one of the CE Shop webinars. It was an internal webinar of experts, and she came as a licensee who with less than 3 years experience, and she's killing it. And I just saw on Facebook that she did a podcast for Spanish speaking agents in Georgia, and I was like, she's mine, she's mine.
That's got to feel good knowing that you've kind of helped birth her. No, I don't want to say that, but you've helped her on her career path. That's got to be exciting. Okay,
Yes,
let's
very.
flip it. Let's go the other side. This is very competitive business. And sometimes it's tough to stay motivated when you're going through those feast and famine swings, right? So what's the most challenging part of your job, either as a educator or broker, and how do you keep motivated?
I love real estate. I love actually the what some people consider boring, which is the license law stuff. Um, so when I'm slow in my career as a real estate associate broker, because remember I practice as an associate broker, and when I'm slow buying and selling because I've saved money, I have the options of doing other things, but I take lots of classes. When you're slow, learn about something different. Commercial real estate is its own red wagon. Title work is its own thing also. So if you are slow, take the opportunity to learn. Or you can, if you have planned accordingly, that is when you enjoy your family and your puppy and do the things like that. And then the most challenging thing in real estate education that I personally go through is the different states. I love all the legal updates and the changes and stuff, but being in multiple states, not everybody, but many states look at agency differently. They have different landlord tenant laws, and keeping all of that track is a challenge, but it's an exciting challenge for me, and I love it.
Interesting. All right, I'm going to throw you a curveball here. If I could make you queen of the day and you could change one thing about the real estate industry, what would you change?
I would not allow qualifying brokers to supervise as many licensees as they do in the state of Georgia.
I can appreciate that. Appreciate that. Well, Amy, thank you so much for spending your time and giving us a little bit of your insights. It's been wonderful talking to you, and thanks for sharing your wisdom with us.
It was nice. Thank you for having me.
And that's it for the Legacy Blueprint Plan It Forward today. We look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
That concludes today's episode of Legacy Blueprint Plan It Forward with Mike Bascom. Each week, we bring you insights from thought leaders across law, finance, and wealth planning. Because building your legacy is never a one-person journey. It takes a team of dedicated professionals working in harmony to turn vision into achievement. If you're ready to take the next step toward your secure future, visit bascomlaw.com or call 77028559493. And don't forget to tune in again next week as we highlight more experts and strategies to help you plan it forward with confidence.